Hey guys, thanks for tuning in today. Today we are doing French onion smothered pork chops and sweet potato wedges. We're going to go ahead and get started on the sweet potato wedges, and they can get in the oven while we work on the pork chops. So I went ahead and peeled one sweet potato. I'm just going to peel the other one. I got my trash can right here in front of me. Another thing you can do is put old newspaper or a sheet of plastic wrap on top of your cutting board. Peel everything onto that newspaper or plastic wrap. Wad that up and then throw that away, and that will help make your cleanup time a little easier because everything will be on that newspaper or piece of plastic. I don't have any newspaper here to do that with, or else I'd show you. But so we're just getting this peeled up real quick. Come on. So we're about done. You can also just clean your sweet potato really good and just leave the peels on if you like the peels. It's all kind of personal preference. I always peel them off, but that's just me. If you like sweet potato peels, just leave them on. Knife. So we're just going to cut these in half. If you kind of get your knife stuck, just kind of take your flat hand and kind of bang your way through it, and then we'll just kind of cut these into wedges here. If you got kind of a big one like that, I'll sometimes cut them in half. That way, you know, things get a little more evenly cooked. So we'll just finish cutting that one up. I'm just going to throw them in a bowl over here. Take my other one, got that one chopped through. Add that to the bowl. And then we're going to add our seasoning blend, which is seasoning, salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, cumin, thyme, oregano, paprika. It'll be on your recipe. I usually keep it kind of stirred up, mixed up already, just because I use it on a lot of stuff. So we're going to add about a tablespoon and a half of that, 2 tablespoons of oil, and then we just got to mix this up. Let me grab some gloves. Just going to mix this up so everything is nice and covered. I went ahead and preheated my oven to 400 degrees and lined a baking sheet with foil. So that way I can just put these right on there. And they're ready to go. You just want to spread them out to a single layer. And sometimes if there's a little bit of oil left in the bottom, I'll take a couple, smear them around back in there, spread them out. Now we're going to put this in the oven, and it's going to go for about 30 to 40 minutes depending on your ovens, and then they'll be ready to go. Now we need to get our pork chops ready. I got 2 bone-in pork chops here. You can do boneless as well. Just if you do bone-in, remember when you're eating there's bones in them. A little salt and pepper on them. I went ahead and preheated my pan with my butter in there. I got that nice and melty. Got salt and pepper, a little onion powder, and a little garlic powder. And my onion powder. I'm going to season the other side when I get them in the pan. So my pan is kind of hot. I can hear a little bit of a sizzle, so I'm going to go ahead and leave those there. And I'm just going to season the other side of the pork chop real quick. I like a lot of pepper, so I'm going to add a little extra pepper to them. Salt. My onion powder. And my garlic powder. And we're kind of using the same seasonings on everything. onion powder, garlic powder. They go well with caramelized onions for whenever we do our French onion stuff. Now we need to chop up some onions. We just got yellow onions here. I've done it in restaurants before. I've used, purple and yellow mixture. Kind of do whatever you prefer. If you like caramelized purple onions really well, do purple onions. It doesn't matter. It's your food, so you should enjoy it. So we're just going to cut both ends off. So we're just cutting the stem and the root off, both these. Then we're just going to cut these in half. Peel everything away. Try not to cry in the process. These have been a little bit of tearjerker lately. When I did these onions a little earlier, I started crying. Thankfully, you all weren't here to watch because no one wants to see a grown man cry, especially while we're just cutting onions. So we got our onions ready to go. Just kind of clean that away. And I'm just going to cut these into strips. And one thing you want to make sure you do, you'll notice the lines in the onion. Cut with those lines when you do this. So when you cut the ends off, you see those lines going like that. Cut this way, going with the direction of the lines. It'll help with making them not as tear jerking, and it'll also, the cooking process, help it go faster too. So we're just cutting these up. You can do them as thin or as thick as you like. I like thinner ones. And the thinner they are, the more onions it looks like you got. So we're just chopping away. If you have one of those nifty mandolin choppers, you can do that. Just be very careful using it. They are dangerous. You can take off part of your finger before you even realize it. So our onion is just about done. One thing I always tell people whenever they're chopping onions like this, if it's getting to the point where you're scared of holding it, you can just lay that down and finish chopping it that way. So our onion is nice and chopped. I want to go ahead and get my garlic ready. Just got a clove of garlic. Gotta whip those onions. I'm going to put my knife flat on the onion, or on the garlic. Just give it a nice little smash. And just going to chop it up. And then we'll have garlic to go with our onions. Don't push them together just yet, because you want to cook the onions for a little while before you add the garlic. If you add them both at the same time, that garlic will burn before it caramelizes and gets where we want it to be. Just going to take my pork chops, give them a little flip. You can let them go longer and get a little more sear on there. And we're going to smother these and everything. They'll be alright. We're going to kind of cover that and all this nice French oniony love. I went ahead and started my onions. This is kind of the color you want. You got a nice caramelization. It took about 20 to 30 minutes depending on your temperature. Don't walk away from these. You want to stay with them, because 1 minute they're normal looking onions, next minute they're burnt, and then you got to start the process all over again. So stick with them and watch them. It's well worth it, I promise. They're just kind of hanging out on low right now, kind of staying warm, so that way we can continue on with the video. You want to do your pork chops about 3 to 5 minutes aside, depending on the thickness of them. So you just kind of gotta wait. You can gather up your cheese and all your other ingredients for your pork chops. If you guys can just smell in here, because from we've already cooked the onions, they smell fantastic. So our pork chops are just about ready to come out, and just gotta add our onions. So I'm going to go ahead and just take these out. And instead of putting these fresh ones in, we're just going to kind of change up real quick. We'll use these caramelized ones just to save time. So we got, after 20 to 30 minutes of cooking, our onions are ready to go. We just did some TV magic and got caramelized onions. Our garlic was added about 10 minutes in. Now we just need to add our flour. We got 2 tablespoons of flour here. This is going to create a roux, and this is going to thicken up our beef broth whenever we add it here in just a second. So I'm just mixing that flour in. It's going to soak up all that extra fat that was in the pan. So we're just mixing that in. And this is going to make what's called a roux. It's what people use to thicken up soups and gravies. It's just a mixture of flour and fat, rather it be butter, oil, bacon grease. So we got that. We're going to add a 1.5 cups of beef broth. I add a little at a time so that way it can kind of, if it's cold, it's going to shock the pan and it'll make it harder to thicken up, and you run the risk of getting potential what people call dough balls or roux balls in your soup. So I always add a little at a time, kind of mix it in, especially if your broth is cold. Try to do room temperature if you can, and it will help it thicken up and absorb faster. So I think I'm at the point where I can pretty much add all of it. It's getting nice and thick, kind of like a good French onion soup. So you can see where the roux is really starting to work and thicken up here in the center, and kind of a little thinner around. You just gotta kind of keep mixing it up. And you don't want it to be a solid paste. You want it to be a little runny, because French onion soup isn't a super thick soup. We're thickening it up so that way it gives it more gravy consistency for the pork chops. Then we're going to add a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. It is a tablespoon, right? Sorry, a teaspoon Worcestershire, and a teaspoon of balsamic vinegar. This will kind of just add some underlying umami flavors, and the balsamic vinegar will kind of help break up a little bit of the fat and add a little acidic pop to it. We need a little bit of thyme, about 2 teaspoons, I think. 1 teaspoon. Our garlic is already in there, and then a little bit of salt and pepper, and we will be all set to add our pork chops back in. And just our salt. So this is looking good, smelling good. We got some nice caramelized onions. We got some bits from the pork chop searing in there. We're just going to take our pork chops, add them back to the pan. And we want to start smothering it in this French onion soup mix gravy stuff. So spoon the onions and the gravy over top of the pork chops. If you guys could smell this, and if you're worried that your pork chops are a little still too under for you right now, it's cooking in the sauce, and we're going to put this in the oven for a little bit too to help melt the cheese. So we got those nice and smothered. I'm going to take some provolone cheese here and just cover up those pork chops, kind of like you would the soup, where they put the soup in the bowl, put a couple croutons, put the cheese on top. We're putting the cheese on top of the pork chops, and just got to put this in the oven for a couple minutes to melt the cheese You can turn your broiler on, or you can, from where you have the sweet potato fries in there, let's throw it in there, and the cheese will get nice and melty on top. So I'm going to go throw this in the oven. Make sure you turn off your stove when you leave it. And in we go. So we got some sweet potato fries here already done. You can see where they're getting nice and caramelized or toasty on there. So good. My camera guy already quality checked a couple for you to make sure they tasted good. So now we just gotta wait a second to get our cheese melted. We'll fast forward to that here in a second, so don't drop your food. We'll be back in a second once our pork chops are done. So I think our cheese is nice and melty, so we're going to grab them out of the oven and take a look at everything. That's looking nice and melty. So just going to take a couple sweet potato wedges here. I like getting all fancy like that. Then we'll grab, remember this pan is hot, so be careful moving it around. Grab a nice pork chop here. Look at how melty that cheese is. We'll put that right on there. Grab some of these caramelized onions right here. Just kind of spoon them around. I can't wait to eat this one. And so stringy. Cool. So there we have it. Caramel or French onion soup, smothered pork chops, and roasted sweet potato fries. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time.